Welcome. You are here with Dr. Nilda Perez with Business Foresight, creating strategies towards your extraordinary future. Hello and welcome to the Dr. Nilda Business Foresight Show. Today, I am very excited to have with us Tom Hazzard. Tom Hazzard is the president of Brandcasters Inc. What they do is help broadcast people's messages in the most effective way so that they can bring their message to the world and reach a larger audience. And of course, as always, so that they can take their customers, so that they can convert customers. They help entrepreneurs, authors, experts, major publications, sports stars, entrepreneurial influencers broadcast their original message. Tom provides businesses of all sizes to a system to spread their marketing message, to grow their valuable audience, and diversity into high converting revenue streams without a lot of time, cost, or effort. He is an inventor of a highly successful product design. Tom has been rethinking brand innovation into design and success. He also has his own podcast, and the podcast, he's a co-host for Feed Your Brand, Product Launch Hazards, and What the TFFFF, question mark, exclamation point, 3D printing. So I'm really happy to have you here. You know that I love innovation, anything that's creative and that's new and that's cutting edge, and you bring all of that to the table. So I'm really excited to have you here. Welcome.
Thanks so much. Thank you. Very happy to be here.
So where do we start? You have this awesome business, where you teach people not just podcasting, because in my conversations with you, it's so much more than just podcasting. Anybody can start a podcast, but you teach them how to monetize that podcast. You teach people how to take that and leverage it and actually create a customer base and convert.
That's right. It doesn't even have to be a podcast. It can also be video, just like you're doing now. The reality is that today on the internet, there's more than 1 billion websites out there and growing. There's actually a place you can go on the internet. Just Google how many websites are on the internet, and you'll get to a website that it's counting, new websites every second. And everybody in business thinks, well, you got to have a website. And that's true, you do. But can you imagine trying to climb to the top of rankings of 1 billion websites? There's a lot of competition out there.
It sure is. Yeah. And so with that, my next question is, well, isn't SEO supposed to be like all the rage and, if you have good enough SEO, your website will rank?
Well, it's really not that way anymore. Now, SEO is still a thing, and it's still very important, but it's different than it used to be. It used to be 10 years ago, you could make sure that your web pages are configured a certain way and that all the headers of all the pages are configured a certain way. There were things that someone with knowledge could do to your website sort of behind the scenes, and maybe a little bit you would notice if they made some changes. And then your website would rank higher on search engines. And okay, that was fine. And still today, I don't think a day goes by that I don't get an email from some company somewhere in the world offering to provide an SEO service to get my site to rank. And
Absolutely.
I don't believe them. Them. And,
but that's because you're knowledgeable. So,
right.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know if anybody believes them because they get so many of them every day.
That's true.
How can they all be right? Or, I don't know. To me, I think that it's been oversold. But really, what is it that can help you rank above the 1 billion other websites? And it does come down to website content. And really what I mean is mostly written content on your website. And the more original written content you have, that's what Google is looking for. And, this is no secret. I'm not the only person that knows this. And you can read, a lot of other articles out there that point to this. But Google every day, it has what they call spiders, which are programs that are looking through every website on the internet. And they're looking at every website on a weekly basis at least. And they're looking for what's new. Is there new content being created here on a regular basis? Is that content original? And how long is that content? Is it just a simple summary post referencing something else? Or is it a real significant piece of informative original content? And really, Google, when it finds this original content, it says, okay, and it's being created regularly, wow, this website deserves to come up higher in search engine, in searches, and the actual particular posts, and these are what we're talking about as blog posts here primarily, deserve to be ranked higher in a search on all these different keywords and keyword phrases. It's not just single words. And really, the only way, you can't game the system. You can understand what Google's looking for and then work to provide what they're looking for. Okay. But it's not like a trick, right? It's not something you just have to configure to your website. You need to, on a regular basis, if you want to outrank other sites, get more organic traffic to your site, you have to be creating a very large amount of content, written content, on a regular basis. What we say is consistent and constant.
Right. One of the things that I remember hearing like a few years back was, when you have those articles, I'm a writer and I love to write. And, but the truth of the matter, in the interest of time, it's very difficult.
Yes.
Nevertheless, one of the things that I was always told is that I should keep my blog posts anywhere between 300 and 500 words, 500 being max. And if I went to 550, I was really pushing the envelope. You're saying that's not true.
That's not true anymore. It may have been true at one point in the history of the internet, or in the history of what Google was looking for and optimizing things for, but it's definitely changed, and it will continue to change. Right now, as we understand it, the optimum length of a blog post is in the 12 to 1500 word range. Now, there are exceptions to this. My business partner, Tracy, is an Inc. columnist, and she is limited. Inc. really tells their authors, keep your blog posts to like 650 words or less or something, and just for what they want for their site, for whatever their purposes are. And
their audience, like they probably, because I know they do a lot of beta testing, and they probably have found that anything longer than that, people don't really engage. And so, so I guess in the interest of keeping their audience engaged, maybe that's the reason why 650 is the most, but they have a lot of blogs.
They do.
They can keep people on their site for hours on end, at least.
That's true, they can. And I think there's a big difference, and I want to make a distinction here, between the optimum length of a blog post to keep someone engaged who just happens to find that post through, let's say, a Google search, or what is going to be most effective for bringing to raising awareness for you, your brand, your website, and your content. And those are two very different things.
Okay, please explain the distinction between one and the other.
Sure. So what we do at Brandcasters is we do use typically either podcasting or video as a tool to create the content. You're a writer, you understand, it takes you probably several hours to write a decent blog post, of just thinking and typing and revising, right?
Right, absolutely.
And I think for people that are not writers, it can take a lot longer. It can take 5, 6. I've heard people telling me, they're spending several days writing a blog post. So you can see how, if you want to create, at least one new post every week. I mean, for a lot of people, it would take 20%, 25% of their time to do that. And it's very hard to justify spending that much time writing a blog post. So
Absolutely.
what we do is we teach and we advocate to actually speak your way to a blog post, either by recording video like you and I are now, or recording audio in the form of a podcast. Even if you're going to record video, I'm going to suggest you repurpose that as a podcast, because that's just another channel you can distribute it on and reach more people.
Right.
But
right.
Then what we do is we convert that spoken content into a written blog post. And we at Brandcasters Inc. have a proprietary process. We have employees that we have hired and trained over a very long period of time to transcribe and proof and edit those audio recordings to then create a written blog post that's very powerful. And here's where the big distinction is going to come in. When you record, let's say, a 20-minute podcast, that is going to be probably around a 4,000-word blog post at the end of the day. And if you go on and record 45 minutes to an hour, you can have a 10, 12,000-word blog post, which I'm sure a lot of people listening to us now and would think, wow, who's ever going to read through 10,000 words or more in a blog post? I don't have time for that. That may be, but that's not the point of it. The point is Google will go and find that new content every week. You create it. They will find that 10,000 word blog post. And there may be a main, and there will be a main, what we call focus keyword phrase. That's the main point of the post. But then within all those 10,000 other words are going to be thousands of other keyword phrases that Google will read.
Right.
That's all we're caring about. Google's reading it.
Google reading it. Right.
And Google will cross-reference and what they call index all of those different sub-keywords or other keyword phrases with the main keyword phrase. And now, when you do this consistently, at least one post a week, but I'll tell you, when people are starting a new marketing effort or a new business, we recommend people do 4 or 5 pieces of content a week. We did that for ourselves.
Okay.
And then you will very quickly, you can track this. There are many tools you can analyze your own website with, but you can see month over month and even week over week how many new keyword phrases you are ranking on, and it will start to climb north very quickly when you do this.
I love it. So what you're saying is that the purpose of having long blogs is not necessarily for people to read, but it's mostly for the blog post is mostly for Google to be able to rank your site high. And rather than having to on a regular basis, and you recommend in the beginning several times a week, writing 12,000, anywhere between 1,000 and 12,000 words in an article, you do that through podcasting.
Correct. And it still is a very well-written blog post that is an article that someone could read if they want to. If they're really interested in the subject, maybe they will. But yes, that's not the point. The blog post serves several purposes. First is as a supplement to your podcast, especially if it is an audio podcast,
right.
Audio recording, because people listen to you on the podcast while they're driving, or
right.
they even if they play it on their computer and they could be looking at something, it's playing in the background and they're doing something else, right? But at some point, especially if they're commuting to work, you're going to talk about something visual, or you're going to talk about a website that they might want to visit, and they need a place to go to see a picture of something you're talking about, maybe look at a video clip of something you mentioned, or to get links that you talked about. And so they will come to your website and that blog post to do that. So it's a supplement to the audio or video recording, number one. And then more importantly, podcasting's gotten very popular. It continues to get
popular.
more popular.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, there are some new numbers that just came out 2 weeks ago by Edison Research that more than 21% of Americans are listening to podcasts on a regular weekly basis. That's up from 17% in 2016. And they're listening to, on average, about 5 podcasts regularly that they are wanting to hear.
And the thing is also that they can even listen to podcasts in their car, because today a lot of the new cars give you that capability. So people are opting to listen to podcasts, learning, things through podcasts or whatever their interest is while they're driving. So you really have a captive audience.
You really do. And you were able to, people have been listening to podcasts in the car for a long time, but they've had to use their own device. And you're right. Now the automakers have included a podcast button starting in 2016 with most new cars. And in fact, I have a relative who has a 2012 Dodge Charger, and he sent me a picture recently of his dashboard, and his software was updated on the vehicle when it was serviced, and now they added podcast functionality to his older car. So yes, it's gotten incredibly popular, and it continues to grow. So there's a very big market of podcast listeners out there.
Okay. So now you talk about repurposing content. So how does that look on Google when you have like somebody like me, who I have the video show, I have the podcast, then I'm going to take that same identical information and I'm going to take that and it's going to be translated into, isn't that like an overkill of the content?
Not at all.
Okay,
good.
It's
not overkill. In fact, Google is looking for the written content first.
Really?
Okay, they are. And now they do want to see what I describe as a well-rounded assortment of content on your site. They want to see there are some videos there. They'd like to see there's images there. And to the extent that those can be original that don't exist elsewhere on the internet, that's also a plus. But the written content, they really want to see first. But here's also the wonderful thing about Google, and this is actually not particularly new, although not many people know it. But back in 2009, Google's algorithms that are crawling through your site, looking at your content, analyzing all those words, gained the ability to be able to tell when they're looking through the words of a post if that post was created by somebody thinking and typing versus somebody speaking. It can actually tell because of the words and the order of the words that written content came from human speech.
Really?
Yes.
That's crazy.
Well, it is crazy, but when you think about it, it makes sense because as we talk like this, we're not speaking in perfect sentences in all proper grammar. We're so there are ways that it can tell. But the real wonderful thing about that is Google actually ranks posts that come from human speech higher than posts that come from, and this is nothing against good quality writers on this earth, real authors.
Right.
But because I have a few clients that are real authors and they're very picky. They don't like sometimes these blog posts that have come from their podcast because they want to all be proper grammar, proper English. But I always tell them, we don't want to change that too much. We do edit it. We get rid of repetitive things, unnecessary things, but we want Google to realize that it came from human speech because it's going to rank higher when someone like you're all about, futurism, forward-looking things, right? So somebody Googles on, innovation of the future or whatever it might be. You may have a post that is perfect for that. You may have many posts that are ideal for that search, and they're going to come up on Google. And if all your posts were written from a standard thinking and writing process that that people are taught in school when they learn about writing, your posts would actually not rank as high on Google's search order than somebody who was talking about it in a podcast and converted that into written. Theirs would come up higher because it values the human speech more.
Okay. So here's another question. So I'm going to take my podcast and we're going to get it translated and we're going to put it up. So it's going to say, Tom said, da da da, Dr. Nilda said, da da da. So is it going to read like, how is it going to read? Because,
You know,
eh,
that's sort of the rookie way to do it. It can
okay.
be done that way. And in podcasting, the sort of old school, the original is old school. Podcasting is only like 12 years old, but the original way to do it
See,
was
innovation, how quickly has changed that we can say something that's 10 years old is already old school.
way it is.
Yeah,
It's
isn't that
so true.
crazy? Yeah.
But the old way to do it is you created a podcast and you're trying to build really what is equivalent of a radio audience, but it's not limited by geography because your antenna
Right.
only reaches in greater Los Angeles or greater New York or whatever, and you don't have to have a network of radio stations, right? So
Right.
podcasting's global. So instantly when you publish a podcast, you can reach anybody in the world who's looking for a podcast, which is a wonderful thing. But you used to be trying to only build that audio audience. And yeah, most people had a website and they would have a blog post for each episode, but really it was only a very, very short blog post, 100 or 200 words at most, that just gave you a quick little summary paragraph about the episode, maybe a couple of links, but other than that was directing you to iTunes to go listen, to subscribe or something like that.
Hmm.
And that's the old school way to do it.
Okay.
Where you're staying sort of within the podcasting bubble, which is admittedly a big and growing bubble. It's a great thing to build a podcast audience, no question. It's very powerful, and we should talk about some of the power of the audio message before we're done today.
Yes.
But the what the real benefit today in the modern internet is to rank on Google. You want people to find you. And unless you already know you want to listen to a podcast on something and you go into iTunes or Stitcher to search for a podcast, where is somebody going to go to type in what they're looking for?
Right.
Google. Right.
Yeah.
So
Google,
that's where everyone's going to go first.
whether on your phone or your computer or your iPad, Google is the first place to go.
Correct.
Actually, the only place to go. So
it really has become the only. There are other search engines, but Google by far is the very biggest, at least in most of the world. I think in China it may not be, but that's a whole nother market. Who actually, that's a whole nother thing. I don't want to go off on that tangent.
Okay.
But in the English speaking world, which I think we can fairly say is what we're talking about here,
and it's quite global.
Yes,
because the English speaking world has become quite global.
Absolutely.
It is the language of business.
Yeah.
So, right.
And it is. And in fact, on our podcast, we have listeners all over the world. In fact, one of our larger audiences is in Brazil. Why? I don't really know. But anyway, we have listeners all over the world too on our shows.
Yeah.
But people will go to Google and type it in. And so what you want to do is to be seen where people are looking for things first. And that's what these do. So the old school, I remember your question was on the transcript, and here I sort of got off on a tangent.
That's okay.
In addition to that, this was my point why I got onto that little summary blog post. Usually they would also make a transcript of the podcast downloadable as a PDF in that little blog post. Okay. In that, remember the old school, I was talking about the old school post, quick summary paragraph, some links, directing you to iTunes, and I missed this part. They would also have usually a transcript, which would be very much like what you're talking about. Dr. Nilda Colin said this. Tom Colin said that. It's really hard to read. And I don't know that how many people actually read those. They may have downloaded them for a certain purpose. It usually wasn't just for, reading the whole thing. But it really did nothing for you in terms of casting a wider net on the internet for people to find you. It did not have any Google ranking value as a downloadable PDF. Google's search algorithms and spiders don't go through that PDF looking at what's in there. They see there's a downloadable PDF, and maybe that has a little point for something, but it wasn't doing a whole lot. So what we recommend and what we do for ourselves and for our clients is to take that transcription, make it very easy to read. It's going to be 90 to 95% what's actually spoken. It will be edited a little bit to clean it up And we don't do the Dr. Nilda colon and then Tom colon. No, we put the host in bold type and the guest in normal type. And it's edited and made easy to read. It flows well, and it's a little more prose edited, put into there, but it still has the essence of the original speech. So it becomes really easy on the eyes. And, it's like you are reading and in a part of this conversation that happened between two people. Okay. And so if you weren't able to listen to the show, or you don't want to listen to it for whatever reason, you just want to see what are the images related to it. People will go through these posts and read 10% of it, maybe. Some people may read more. Mm-hmm. Like I said earlier, it's good. It's a supplement to mm-hmm. the audio or the video show. But mm-hmm. I'm going to, even when I do it, I put in a track player of the podcast. So you can be listening to it. You go to the blog post, and when somebody finds it on Google, right? And they say, oh, I want to know more about what this post is saying about innovation of the future or whatever. And you click on that post, you go to the host's website, and right at the top under the summary is a place you can play the podcast there. You don't have to go to iTunes and subscribe if you don't want to. So you can listen and then be scrolling through all the written text of it, looking at the relevant images and other things that are really, and have the full experience in one place.
Okay, fantastic. I love it. So, how do small businesses use all of this, use their podcasts, and again, because if I'm hearing you correctly, if you have a live show, you should translate that into a podcast, and then that should be translated also into a blog post. So just, you're really it's like a sponge trying to get all the juice out of that one piece of content.
That's exactly right. Whether you're creating an original video or an audio, if you don't convert that into other forms that if you don't convert it into other forms and publish it every way possible, then you're leaving money on the table in terms of whether it's literal money in terms of monetization for your website that's mm-hmm. not benefiting from as much traffic as you could get, or you're not growing your reach in an audience as much as you could be. Okay. It's just like you're not taking full advantage of the time and effort you spent making that original content in the first place.
Okay. And what this does for small businesses or individual, it helps them stand out in this overloaded media, because the reality is that there seems to be an oversaturation of everything, like a podcast, an oversaturation of blog posts, or oversaturation of, and so you're spending this time doing this, but is this really positioning you to stand out?
It really does. And again, it all comes back to Google, and that's how you're standing out. When people are going to Google to search first, if you don't have written content on your site that is going to be provided to people that search, they're not going to know about you. Here's an important thing that will help illustrate this point. The average website of those 1 billion websites on the internet, average website ranks on 64 keyword phrases. Only 60, average website on 64 keyword phrases, which is very low. Websites that use this process rank on tens of thousands of keyword phrases. And it continues to grow. You may think, oh, I'm going to create this content and Google's going to analyze it, index it, and let's say they find 50 keyword phrases in that post that they'll increase me on. Okay, but that's all I'm going to get out of it. That's actually not true. Here's a stat that'll blow your mind. Every single day, 25% of the things that people type into Google's search bar, Google has never seen before.
Really?
Very, very true. Yes. When you think about it, our information keeps exploding. And this is a very real stat. And you might think, how is that possible? How are there those many more words and word combinations people could be entering? Well, there are, and you have to keep in mind, people also enter in very bad grammar, they enter in misspelled words, and even
Right.
misspelled words get ranked and indexed. So, you know, we have new words and new phrases being created all the time. So 25% of everything Google sees every day, it's never seen before. So what is it going to do when it has this type of a keyword phrase someone types in? It's going to send it somewhere. It's not going to not give you any results. It's going to give you the most relevant results it has or it knows of. So that means every day there are 25% of the new keyword terms being typed into Google that could be being directed to your website. And if you don't have content that's been indexed on other keyword phrases, it won't point new words to you either. So, I mean, you continue to build on this. With 25% of the words being typed in new every day, there's always new keywords that are being pointed to certain content on certain websites, and you can be one of them. So that's why it continues to pay dividends down the road.
Okay. Awesome. Wow, this is great information. So this is how you stand out. These are the things that you do to stand out. So your recommendation is going back is that people have this podcast, video podcast, translate this. How long does this take? Because I know from my perspective, I comb the earth for the best guests that are going to be the perfect match for my show. I'm very cognizant of what I'm bringing my audience. So that's one job. And then actually scheduling them, getting you on, making sure that we have covered the things that, that I want to get from you and that you want to get from the show. So that's one thing. And then now once this is over, now I have to take that and translate it and then make sure that the keywords are there. That's a lot of work.
It certainly can be.
Okay.
It can be a lot of work. If you're trying to do it all yourself, if you're creating 4 or 5 new pieces of content every week, that would probably be a full-time job for you alone. And if you're a solopreneur or, an up-and-coming business owner, you probably can't afford to spend that much time. But most people start out that way. They think, oh, I can do it myself. It won't be that hard. And they start. And I was one of those too. I mean, 4 years ago, I thought, wow, I was doing all this reading. And I thought, well, maybe podcasting is a good way for me to build an audience in an area that I wanted to establish my expertise in. And it wasn't actually about podcasting and content. It was about something else.
Okay.
And, I read, 20 different books about podcasting. I watched about 50 or 60 different videos about how to podcast and read a ton of blog posts about it. And there's a lot of content out there about podcasting in and of itself. We don't really call what we do podcasting. We call it brandcasting because we don't do just the podcast editing and production and publication because, like I said, you're leaving money on the table. There's so much more that can be done with it. And in fact, by the time we're done with it, podcasting is maybe 20% of the work that we do. The rest is everything else. But it's an easy way to create the content. So if, somebody starting out is just wanting to create content and they're thinking, I need to write all this stuff, I would definitely say record it and then have that translated, transcribed, because that's going to be a lot faster than just thinking and writing it. But if you were to do all research and do it all yourself, yes, there's a laundry list of things you need to do. And I don't really recommend that. So what are your options? What I recommend is you do the most important part that requires you. You're an expert in something. You have a talent in a certain area. You have an area of interest that you could speak for hours on end on.
Absolutely.
So do that and break it down into subjects. Podcast average length may be about a half an hour, but anywhere from a half an hour to an hour is pretty typical. Break it down into subjects that you can talk about in that period of time, or interview guests that, where you can conduct the complete interview in usually under an hour. And then that's it, and leave the rest to somebody else. Now, there is a cost to doing that. And then maybe you in your business already have an administrative assistant or support staff, or you could hire a new VA to do it. When you do video, there's actually a little known secret and tip that if, let's say you record everything as a video and you put it up on YouTube, which is not a bad thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
Putting up a YouTube is a good way to reach a certain market of people.
Mm-hmm.
And YouTube will actually create a transcript of your video that you can download after a certain period of time. Now, it's not done by a person. It's done by a computer program.
Mm-hmm.
And it usually requires a lot of cleanup, and that could take you a lot of time as well. But if you were willing to live with the quality of that transcript and make that the basis of your blog post, well, they'll create it for you and it doesn't cost anything. In a podcast, there are companies that will do a software transcription of your episode. Again, we find the quality is not acceptable for the quality level that we're willing to accept. But some people, and maybe early on when you don't have as much budget, that's a compromise you need to make, and you can do that. So there's a way you can get content created and put it up on your site. And another thing that Google and other programs that analyze blog posts will do is tell you how well written is that post. Is it easy to read? Is it difficult to read? And with those computer or software transcriptions, that can hurt that, I guess, analysis. It may not be very well done. So we recommend an actual human being does it. And whether you hire a service that has human people that transcribe things, or you have an assistant that can do it, or you even do it yourself, there are certainly a lot of options out there. We actually ended up building a whole company around this whole idea, because once we did it, we created a system to do it for our own podcasts. Then people we would meet in business who learn what we're doing say, hey, I could use that. Could you do that for me? And, I need that. Can I get in on that?
Right,
and so it ended up sort of growing organically. And over a couple of years, we ended up building into a whole new company with its own employees. And the benefit of doing something like that is you have people, if you use, our service, or I don't know that anybody does it quite like we do, but there are other services out there. If you use a service, they're trained and they know what they're doing. They're doing it every day. It's their primary job. It's not something on the side of what they're doing. And as things change with what Google is looking for, we're on top of that. As things change in the world of Apple and podcasts, we're on top of that. But they also, having somebody who transcribes your stuff on a regular basis who knows you does a better job of transcribing you, because maybe you have a certain accent or you have certain phrases you say. And that if you get a different, because when you use a third party just transcription service on the internet, and I'll give you one, some your listeners might be interested, it's called VoiceBase. Okay, voicebase.com. That's one you can just upload any audio file and you can order either a software transcription or a human transcription. But I guarantee you, every time you upload one, a different person is doing it, even if you get the human transcribed one. And there are going to be different kinds of mistakes every time you do it, because that person doesn't know you. They're not used to you. Okay. So there are benefits of, pros and cons. That may be cheaper on the one hand, but how much time are you going to spend correcting their work before you post it? And then there's even posting it, because what we do for our clients, we don't just give you a transcription and say, here, go create your own post. No. We actually get login credentials to your site and put up the blog post, compose it for you, add all the images, all the links, all those things, so that when you talk about not having enough time in the day because you're focusing on building whatever your core business is, leaving these things to someone else makes a lot of sense.
Okay. Now, you also say that there are predictable ways to rise above the crowd in the competition and to reach an audience that will actually convert. And you're saying that we can do this through what we're talking about here. Tell me a little bit more about that. Explain that.
Sure.
Because I'm all about standing out from the competition.
Well, let's talk about the predictable nature of it. I think there are, conventional wisdom, maybe wisdom's the wrong word, conventional thinking would suggest that, hey, if you have a new podcast or you're creating all this new content and you want people to find out about your site, you've got to do some marketing. You've got to put the word out that this information is there that people could come and get. And usually marketing comes at a cost. And what would today, one of the most effective marketing methods would be either advertising on something like LinkedIn or Facebook, one of the modern social media or business networking platforms. And let's just take Facebook for now. Facebook, you can dial into any demographic you want, put an ad out there and say, I want it to be seen by people that are, 21 to 29 years old, are in this geographic area and make this kind of money and have interests in these different things. I mean, you can dial it in so deeply, but there's still a risk and an unknown. Are those people going to respond to the ad that you write and put out there? The information, whether it's video or visual or the words, are you picking the right words? Are they going to find it? Are they going to respond to it, rather? Are they going to respond to it? And also, are they interested in what you really are offering them? There's until you do it and have traction and results, which will cost you, tens of thousands of dollars, maybe many times over, to test and figure out. Here's where I'm saying this is unpredictable to a large degree. Until you have certain mileage under your belt of doing this, where you have a pretty good sense because of results or lack of results, what's going to work or not, that's unpredictable. What is predictable?
Yes.
What's predictable is people are going to go to Google first and type in things they're looking for. Regardless of what you say or how you say it, if you have those keywords on your posts that, Google has found and indexed, and they do this. I mean, this happens on established websites that we work with, within 2 weeks. If somebody types into Google the keywords that are closely related to what we put up a post about, that post will come up on the first page of Google search. Maybe not the very top, maybe toward the lower end of that first page of Google search. But we've seen this happen repeatedly. So Google doesn't discriminate. They don't care how you said it or what you said, or how you said it, or the way you said it, or how it looked, how interesting it really is. All they care about are the words. So they're going to connect the dots between those people searching on Google and your site. This is predictable.
Okay, so so let me ask you a question. So let's say, like, I'm a foresight strategist. My whole thing is the future, and I'm always looking for people who are doing things that are innovative. Am I supposed to, before I even start that podcast, should I be looking for those words? Should I be stating those words throughout my blog or my podcast so that they come? I mean, how exactly would I do that? That would be what I'd be ranked for.
Okay, so that's a very good question, and there's a couple of parts to it. I would say, first of all, I'm sure I know, and other experts in their areas of expertise out there have a point of view. They have to have expertise. They have information to share. And first step would be just start creating that content. Start talking about what you know, giving that information openly and freely, in creating that content, and it will benefit you tremendously. Now, after you've been doing it for quite a while, and you can start to analyze and see how many keywords you're continuing to increase, ranking for over time, how your site traffic increases over time, you can start to get to be a little more surgical in how you're creating these posts. And there are tools that are free, available on the internet, that you can use. And the most important one, I would say, is the Google AdWord Keyword Planner.
Yes.
So usually this is used as a tool to decide, what kind of an ad you might want to structure and to sort of fish where the fish are, but it can be used for creating content as well. So you can type in what you think is a good keyword phrase that you may want to base a post around, and it'll tell you how many people searched for that keyword phrase in the last 30 days. It'll also tell you how much Google is paying per click for advertisers who want to be seen to people typing that word. So you can assess both how many people are looking on that and then what the value is. And then it'll also give you the next 100, it may even be more, but last I remember it was the next 100 keyword terms that the people who typed in that first term also typed into Google that same month. Okay. And that's called relevance. So you can use these tools and others. There's another called BuzzSumo, and there's lots of tools on the internet that you can try to analyze the value of not only a single keyword phrase, but the next 5 or 6 that are closely related to it, and then use that to create what we call a keyword silo. Okay. So that is 5 or 6, it can be 4, but generally 5 or 6 keyword phrases that are related to each other and together will have a lot of Google power if your post is indexed for them. So if you do this research ahead of time before you record your video or record your podcast, by the way, we never recommend scripting what you talk about. It needs to be very real and authentic, right? But you can have an outline. And so in your outline, you have, the main keyword and these other relevant keywords, and you have them there. And as a podcast host, it becomes almost like a little game, if you will, that, all right, I got to work each of these words or these phrases of words into my post. And it's also good to work them in many times, not just once. You want to work them in as many times as you can, because there is especially with the main keyword, a frequency of it existing in the post helps. So you just check it off, every time you talk about it. And if you have one and you're getting 2/3 of the way through your post and you haven't worked it in, you work it in. And there's real, I would say, authentic ways to work them in. It doesn't have to be contrived. Right. But working them in, as long as you speak them, they'll be transcribed. They'll exist in writing in that post. You'll get indexed for them. And then this increases the power of your site. So you can do that research yourself on these keywords, but companies like ours, I assume others must do it too. You can also pay us to give you, for 4 episodes over the course of the month, a keyword silo of terms that are relevant in your field. And if you have ideas, hey, you want to do a post that's on the future of space travel or something, you give us some direction, we can go and look at keywords that are going to be in that area that you want to talk about and then provide them to you.
Okay. So in other words, there is a way, it doesn't have to be random. You can very creatively work your podcast to deliver your message.
Yes, you can.
Podcast, even when you have guests that are not doing specifically what you do, but you can still be able to kind of thread that in.
You really can. And, here's another thing you can do. As you analyze your site traffic over time and the keywords you rank on, you can see what are the most high value keywords. So the average Google pay-per-click amount of money, last time I looked, was around 65 cents pay-per-click, which is pretty low. But there are terms that I know our site ranks on that are paying $9 and $10 and even $25 pay-per-click if somebody's advertising for those keywords. And that's because there's a high demand of people looking for information on those keywords, but a small amount of content and sites out there that are providing information relevant to those keywords. When we find that, and we had this happen maybe 6 months ago, maybe 7 months ago, we found that there were 2 keywords we were ranking on a little bit that were $25 pay-per-click. And we're like, wow, that's great. And our site does have advertising on it, which is driving, Google pay-per-click advertising to our website. So we can make a lot more money if we create another post or more posts that talk about things that are relevant to those keywords. And so we wrote them down, we recorded another post, put it out there, and then we see not only our site traffic, but our monetization rise over time by understanding what the high value keywords are that people are looking for information on, and others are wanting to advertise to the people looking for that information.
So let me ask you a question, Tom. How innovative is this?
I think it's quite innovative. I think only people really within Google and professionals that their business is website monetization really understand the value of this written original content. And the great part about it is it's not a trick. It's not a configuration of your website that, Google could change something about tomorrow, and then your site won't rank as highly. That's the thing. This is not a trick. It is not a shortcut. Okay. Google, regardless of what might be considered a more modern website and an older website, or the configuration of things in the headers of your pages on your site, which can change. There was actually earlier in 2017, there was a Google slap, I think, that we referred to it as a Google slap. Basically, they changed their algorithms of how they analyze and rank sites, and a lot of sites got hurt in that and didn't rank as high. Our sites did not, and it's because the value is in the original content, and that is not going to change, even if other aspects of the internet do change. If you have the original content, you will continue to rank high, have more traffic, have more keywords directed to you, and have more opportunity to monetize that, or just have those people know your message. You reach more people. One of the best examples of a website that has used the same process for many years is WebMD. WebMD is the prototypical example of a website that is what we would call an authority site. They have built themselves as an authority generally in the medical space.
Right.
And what we're suggesting and what we're doing, what we're teaching people to do and doing for our clients is helping them build little authority sites of their own in their little niche of whatever profession they're in.
Right.
And WebMD makes over $500 million a year, and they don't sell anything. All they're doing is creating original content, written content, putting it on their site. Google is sending traffic there, and that is monetized a number of different ways because of the volume of people visiting the site. And they've been doing this for a long, long time, and it continues to work and pay off. So there's a good example of the longevity of this process.
Okay, that's awesome. So I have two last questions. One is, you said you want to talk about the power of audio. I want to revisit that. And
that's right.
Yeah.
I'm glad you wrote that down because I wouldn't have remembered. Yeah. The power of audio. That's very true. And okay, so there's a reason why there are more and more podcast listeners. And I think that is people really enjoy taking in new information through listening as opposed to reading. And there's a good example of this. I mean, not only have I experienced it just because I'm in the business, but I'll give you an example. Did you have another question?
Yeah, because I'll be honest, I never realized it. First of all, I'm not an auditory learner. So when I hear things, so podcasting doesn't work so well for me. So of course, the whole world is like me, right? Of course. So, and I always viewed radio and I always viewed podcasting as so old school. Like my mom tells me, like when she was young, my mom is 86, and she explains to me when she was a child, they would sit by the radio and everyone would listen to the radio.
Right.
And they would have these visual pictures. And she said people were a lot more creative because they had to have this visual picture as they were listening. So I did not realize it until my own podcast, The Power of Podcasting.
Right.
So,
so there's two ways that I can help illustrate the concept of the power. One is just, I would say, as a prime testimonial to it that I think that anybody can relate to. And the other is through conversion from ads in podcasts. So let me talk about the first one first, which is the testimonial. So there is a very well-known modern day author who is a Canadian named Malcolm Gladwell. I'm sure you've heard of him.
yes.
He is a real author of integrity. And when he puts out a book, it becomes a New York Times bestseller very quickly and organically. There are ways you can pay people who know, and when we talk about gaming a system, you can pay companies that will get you on the New York Times bestseller list if you want to spend enough money to do it. That doesn't necessarily mean you got there the original organic way of just a lot of people reading your book. Malcolm Gladwell gets there the original way, organic way, right?
Right.
Well, he started a podcast in late 2016, I believe. And I'm trying to remember, I know the name of his podcast. It'll come to me as we're talking here. But he has a podcast and he's been interviewed on all sorts of shows. And he was asked by a show host, hey, you're an amazing author, incredibly successful. You write a book, it becomes a bestseller, you make millions of dollars with it. Why would you start a podcast? Isn't that small time? It was sort of the way it was put to him. Isn't that small potatoes? And he said, well, no, I'll tell you, people think with their eyes, but they feel with their ears. And what he was saying there is so true. And we've experienced it and seen it with show after show of podcasts that we either have been interviewed on, and we've seen results of that, of how many people hear us on other podcasts and then find us, or how many people respond to calls to action from podcasts that we host or that we produce for others. And it's really true. People listen to you on a podcast week after week. They feel they know you. And to an extent they do, if you're being real, if you're being authentic and providing what I would call edutainment, valuable information for them. And you also are, pleasant to listen to. They feel they know you. And so they respond in different ways and take action. So here's the other part of this is advertising on podcasts. So we have experienced on podcasts we produce when there's a call to action, and I'm talking about we're speaking in the podcast and telling people, hey, we're offering you something as a listener of this show. You have to go to this website landing page and provide your name and your email address. But if you're willing to do that, you'll get this, either information or product, something they don't have to pay for it, but they have to give up their information willingly so that it's a lead generation. They're going to be marketed to for something. But when we've done that, we've had a 37% conversion rate to those calls to action, which is huge for an advertisement in any kind of media, because normal response to an advertisement can be a fraction of a percent.
That's right.
But podcasts are not what I would call general, wide-ranging subjects. They're usually of a focused area. Yours is, looking at the future and innovation and all this, right? And others are a certain medical category, and others might be a certain business topic. So you've got a very focused audience that wants to hear what the host has to say. And if you provide them relevant ads, they respond. And in fact, there's another stat that came out from Edison Research very recently that says that podcast listeners actually do not mind listening to ads. They are more receptive to ads, more than 130% more than in other kinds of media. So, this power of speaking to someone, of them listening to you, it's significant. You need to be providing good value, but if you do, you're going to get great results. You're going to have not just followers, but fans that, and I've done this. My daughter is getting married soon. And so we've had so much to do that we had to take a little hiatus on our podcast. When you've been doing it several episodes a week for a couple of years, which on this one show I have been, you all of a sudden don't produce any episodes for a few weeks to a month. They start, hey, are you guys all right? You still, I miss you.
Because
You
you're
hear
part of
all
the
sorts
family.
of things. Right.
Yeah.
So it's engagement with an audience on a different level. And that's why I do recommend that if you really do have, expertise and talent, and you want to expand your audience, you want to grow a following that is going to be meaningful to you in business, help you market and grow your business, you really can't pick one avenue or another. You need, if you're going to create content to provide to people, you need to do all of it, which is, you got to have some video, you got to have some audio. Now one can be your mainstay. Okay. You don't have to produce a video every day. I actually find it's much easier for most people to produce an audio program, a podcast, than it is a video, because you don't have to worry if your hair is done right. You don't have to worry how you're dressed because you're not on video. I podcast at 11 o'clock at night after my younger kids are in bed and I'm in my pajamas and no one knows because it's just me speaking. So you have a lot more flexibility. You can do it in hotel rooms. You can do it, all over the place.
You can travel and still continue the podcast. Absolutely.
Yep. And if you do it right, it doesn't have to take over your business. I mean, I did, and I still do actually, but now it's across a few shows, like 5 episodes a week. So 20 a month, but I do that in 2 days a month. I schedule it. I plan it. We have systems for training people how to do that. So you schedule guests all on one day, and then you record your other ones that may not have guests at different times on that same day. And you even plan your content for the next month. So in 2 days a month, we're producing 20 of our own shows to be put out as podcasts. And then we give it to our team to then put it out in the other forms of content. And it pays tremendous dividends.
Okay, that's fabulous. I'm so excited because I know that this is information that our audience really, if you have a business, or even if you're thinking of having a business, this is a great way to start. And if you have a business, then this is a way also of marketing. And it's pretty much free because it really doesn't cost much to have a podcast. So a podcast, whether you're talking on this podcast for 30 minutes, on a subject and you're edutaining, like you say, or you have guests, or you, again, there's so many different, or you decided to have a video and turn that into a podcast and then, use the different platforms to share that same information. This is the best way to go.
I really think it is, and there's another aspect. Some of your audience may be thinking, oh, this sounds great, but you know what, for whatever reason, I really want to put out a book. I want to be an author. I want to write a book. Well, we do that. We have many customers. They use their blog posts and it's being transcribed anyway. Just get edited a little differently and make your book. So, anywhere from 12 to 20 episodes can be a book. So you don't, again, it's about multi-purposing your content, getting more return out of your time invested.
Right. So, that's fabulous. I love it. So, what do you want to leave with our audience? Our audience is here. They're captive audience. What's the takeaway?
Well, the takeaway is this. I know, especially if you're new in business, but even if you're a seasoned professional who's been in business for a long time, you probably have an understanding that you need exposure, and it's very hard to be everywhere and to know everything to do. It's like, where to start? Well, my recommendation would be, at minimum, even if you are building something on a shoestring budget, just start creating content, because that will benefit you. Even if you're doing things in not necessarily the optimal way, it'll still benefit you. So start creating content as much as you can, however you can. Now, if you do have some budget for it, And, it doesn't, like you say, it's not tremendously expensive. It's not like pouring tens of thousands of dollars into advertising and things like that. But there are some costs associated with either hiring assistants to help you or having somebody produce your podcast for you or, convert the content, whatever it may be. But that there is a tremendous incremental benefit. And incremental is not strong enough. There's a significant benefit in doing the right things in the right order with the right resources. And there are resources to help you. We have a company that's one of those. And actually, we're rebranding ourselves. So we've been out there as podcaststartpoint.com for a long time. We've rebranded. We are Brandcasters now because really we realized it was so much beyond the podcast.
Right.
So it's now brandcastingu.com, YOU. And, hey, it's no big deal to either connect with us on LinkedIn or, find us on our website, schedule an appointment for a consultation. There are ways that you can really amp up your marketing of your business, help it grow faster than it will otherwise, just getting some help in the right areas. So that's what we do.
Okay, fabulous. So where do you want to be in 5 years?
Me?
Foresight strategist, I always have to look to the future.
Sure.
Where do
Honestly,
you want to be in 5 years?
Okay, so here's the thing. I'll be completely candid with you. Podcasting and this brandcasting business is not my primary expertise. I'm in product design and development, and we have another business. And this business grew out of that just for our own need to market and grow our business. So now it's a well-oiled machine, runs on its own. I do interviews like this, and I'm involved in the sales process, but I've got a good team of people that know what they're doing even better than I, have learned what to do. So I hope in 5 years I've sold that business, still using the processes, but my areas of interest are more in, physical products that you would buy on Amazon or in Target or Costco or places like that. So I have a whole nother business that does that, and I enjoy doing that. So I see us continuing to rock that world.
Awesome. I love it. Well, Tom, I want to thank you for being with us. This has been very exciting. I'm sure that the audience is really has really enjoyed this because this, podcasting and all that you can do with a simple podcast is really pretty fabulous. And you really have stretched out that, part of the problem that I know that I've spoken to so many business owners, and part of the problem is how do I create content? And you're like, easy.
Really easy.
As easy as 1, 2, 3.
As as long as you like to talk about it, then
and who doesn't like to talk about what they're good at, what they know well, right?
Absolutely. Sure, absolutely. And whatever you don't know can be learned or you can be trained on. So
yeah. Awesome. So thank you so much for being here. I look forward to having you back really soon because there's still so much to talk about. And so I look forward to having you back soon. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It was a great pleasure.
Okay. All righty. Bye-bye.
Bye.
I want to thank you for being with us on Business Foresight, always creating strategies towards an extraordinary future. Remember, I'm here with you with strategies every Saturday. I'll see you next week.